Italian emigration reshaped the world, but few stories are as harrowing as what happened to them in Brazil. In today's episode, we will uncover the brutal experience of Italian immigrants and the lasting mark they left on modern Brazil. Italians were present in Brazil since the Renaissance. Genoese sailors and merchants were settlers in colonial Brazil in the 16th century, and this included Amerigo Vespucci. The British outlawed slavery in 1807 and lobbied its trading partners to do the same. By 1850, the British were beginning to seize and destroy Brazilian slave ships, as the practice was now hotly disputed in Brazil. Prior to 1861, Italy was split into several kingdoms and city-states. This meant that the Italian migrant was a man without a clearly defined Italian national identity, but with strong ties to his local town, village or region. The failed uprisings in Italy in 1848 and 1861 meant some very educated revolutionary Italians fled the imperial Austrian occupation and persecution. For example, Libero Badaro, scientist and journalist, fled Liguria for Sao Paulo, and here he ran a liberal newspaper and taught law, until he was assassinated in 1830 to a public outcry. After the Risorgimento in 1871, newly united Italy suffered an enormous economic crisis. In the north, high unemployment and illiteracy was spiked by new agricultural processes and mechanisation, while farming in the southern Italy was completely abandoned. Poverty, hunger and lack of jobs forced the poor rural workers from both the north and the south to flee. Coffee plantations were typically based in the states of São Paulo, Minas Gerais, Espírito Santo and Rio de Janeiro. Brazilian landowners trading in coffee, sugar and livestock insisted migrants were essential for Brazilian agriculture. The call went out in 1878, and the age of mass migration had begun in earnest. Immigrants from Italy, Portugal and Spain were encouraged, as it was thought their Latin culture and Catholicism would integrate more easily and quickly into Brazilian society. Initially, the Brazilian government paid for boat transportation of European immigrants, but later on, the farmers and specialised agencies managed the contractual recruiting of Italian workers. Work in Brazil was advertised in Italy, promising that everyone would become rich by working in coffee. The immigrants typically signed a contract with the farmer to work at the coffee plantation for a minimum period of time in order to pay off the debt for their transportation. Slavery, until then a crucial part of Brazilian agriculture, was finally abolished in 1888, and this left the coffee plantations short on labour. Early Italian colonies settled in the highlands of Rio Grande do Sul, Serra Gaúcha and Bento Gonçalves, the wine capital of Brazil, in 1875. 80% of the early Italian immigrants came from Veneto, Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna and Tuscany. Caisas do Sol swelled with Italians from Veneto and Trento Alto Adige in 1890. Nova Venezia was populated by Italians mainly from Venice around 1891. While agriculture was already on the wane in Rio de Janeiro in the 19th century, Sao Paulo became the lead coffee sugar producer and exporter in the early 20th century. The outlook for Italian immigrants to Brazil was mixed. In southern Brazil, they worked and lived in well-developed colonies, while those in southeast Brazil, such as Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, suffered near-slavery conditions in the coffee plantations. Remember, before the 1930s, Brazil had no labour laws, and these were finally enacted by President Getúlio Vargas. Consequently, until then, workers had no legal protection. Contracts signed by the immigrants were often flouted by the Brazilian landowners who were used to dealing with slaves. They saw little need to treat the European immigrants any different. Italian men, women and children worked on farms. First generation Italian immigrants often suffered near slavery conditions as they slowly bettered themselves and the prospects of their children. If the immigrants became sick at the remote coffee plantations, access to doctors and medication was extremely difficult and costly. In 1889, Brazilian citizenship was granted to all immigrants. Many Italian immigrants quickly naturalized. At the end of the 19th century, there were numerous revolts against Brazilian farm mismanagement and sporadic violence between 1892 and 1896. Horror stories of working conditions escalated into a public scandal in Italy after numerous proven cases of mistreatment of Italian immigrants. The Italian government issued the Pruneti Decree, named after Minister of Foreign Affairs Giulio Pruneti, in 1902, and this banned subsidized immigration to Brazil, but not independent immigration. Many immigrants left Brazil after their bitter experience on Sao Paulo coffee farms. Between 1882 and 1914, 1.5 million immigrants of all nationalities came to Sao Paulo, and nearly half left. Between 1890 and 1904, over 200,000 Italians asked the Italian consulate to leave Brazil, and most Italian repatriation actions was from Brazil. Other than return to Italy, some Italian immigrants moved to Argentina, Uruguay or the United States. São Carlos and Ribeirão Preto were two of the main coffee plantation centers in São Paulo state. These richest coffee farms attracted the bulk of immigrants arriving in São Paulo, and this included Italians between 1901 and 1940. The slowing numbers now of southern Italians who travelled to Brazil were coming from Campania, Abruzzo, Molise, Basilicata and Sicily. Having paid off their transportation debts and made a little money on coffee plantations, some immigrants became farmers themselves. Others, discouraged by the poor treatment, moved to cities, São Paulo, Campinas, São Carlos and Ribeirão Preto, looking for better jobs. In the early 20th century, São Paulo became known as the City of the Italians, as a third of its population had Italian nationality. Italian immigrants were instrumental in the development of big cities in Brazil in the early 20th century. Cities such as São Paulo, Porto Alegre, Curitiba. By 1901, over 3/4 of São Paulo's factory workers were Italians, and high numbers were also found in Rio de Janeiro. Here, barefooted Italian children sold newspapers, often surviving on their wits. Brazilian landowners continued to complain about the lack of workers. Spanish immigrants and later Japanese immigrants after 1908 all faced the same problems. The Italians now began to establish mutual aid societies, hospitals, schools, labour unions, newspapers, radio stations and football teams, including Clube Atlético Juventus, Esporte Club Juventude, Sociedade Esportiva Palmeiras, and Cruzeiro Esporte Club. Italian immigration to Brazil stopped in 1920. Umberto, future King Umberto II of Italy, visited Brazil as part of a Southern American tour in 1924. The new fascist government of Italy hoped to re-engage Italian immigrants living abroad with their mother country, Italy. With the Wall Street crash of 1929, coffee production went through a crisis. Coffee was considered a luxury product, so demand collapsed and Brazil was particularly hard hit. Many immigrants left rural agricultural areas for factories, wood production, pottery and construction. During World War II, the public use of Italian, German and Japanese was strictly forbidden. Italians brought their food with them: pasta, Brazilian pizza, garlic, gnocchi, panettone, mortadella, calzone. So let's now look at famous Brazilians with Italian descent. 4 presidents of Brazil have been of Italian descent. Pasquale Ranieri Mazzilli, his father was from Montemurro, Basilicata. Itamar Franco, Emilio Garastosa Medici, and Jair Messias Bolsonaro, whose grandparents were from Veneto, Calabria. Count Matazzaro, born in Castellabate Salerno, became a rich and powerful businessman. Adoniran Barbosa, born to immigrants from Cavazzese, Venice, wrote songs about life in Italian neighbourhoods in Sao Paulo. Gabriele Martinelli, Brazilian national team footballer. Jorginho, Italian national team footballer with links to Veneto. Rivalino, of Brazil's 1970 World Cup winning team with links to Molise. Thiago Motta, football manager and player with links to Rovigo. Ayrton Senna, Formula One driver with maternal grandparents of Sicilian descent. Emerson Fittipaldi, Formula One driver with links to Basilicata. Xuxa, actress, singer and entrepreneur with links to Alto Adige. Paulo Roberto Falcao, known as simply Falcao, footballer with links to Calabria. Oscar Niemeyer, architect with links to Padova. The majority of Italian descendants live in Sao Paulo state. As of today, 42% of the Italians in Brazil came from northern Italy, 36% from the central regions, and only 22% from southern Italy. Most Italian Brazilians speak Brazilian Portuguese as their native language, and the use of Italian is diminishing. And Brazil is heavily influenced by Italian immigration in terms of cuisine, fashion and lifestyle. The Brazilian constitution states that anyone born in the country is a Brazilian citizen by birthright. Multiple citizenship was banned until 1994. The Italian state believes that large numbers of Brazilians and Argentinians are actively seeking to formalize their Italian citizenship. At the time of recording in 2025, the Italian citizenship rules are being tightened, and I've covered this in another video. Click here to get even closer to Italy and Sicily.